As fantastic a CFP as Mello is, and as wonderful an attorney as I am, please do note that anything said in our show are our opinions alone and are not meant to be taken as financial or legal advice.
Welcome to Finances, the Other F Word, a Gen Xer podcast for musicians and music lovers, where we discuss money and music without all the pretentious bullshit. Here are your hosts, Zoe Terry, attorney at large, and Mel O, certified financial planner and author of Finances, the Other F Word. Listener discretion is advised.
Hey guys, welcome to Finances, the Other F Word. And as many of you know, Roe versus Wade was overturned, and Zoe and I did an episode on Roe versus Wade and all of the potential fallout from that. And unfortunately, it has come to fruition, which really Zoe and I had no doubt. And there was what's it called? A ruling? What's it called that they write?
It was the Supreme Court's decision.
Okay, so I thought it would be educational for all of us to learn a little bit about what is in the decision and basically how to read the thing. And so, of course, we have our lovely host who is an attorney on it. But first, we're going to take a little dink of sparkling rosé.
Cheers!
And
it's Mel's birthday tomorrow, so we're having just a tiny touch.
Just a little sip.
Just a, what is it?
Just a tip?
Just a tip. Just a tip.
So for those of you who are not watching this on YouTube, we are drinking from ridiculously small beer mugs.
Yeah.
Literally like
steins, like
beer steins.
Glass steins, but they're the size of a thimble almost.
Yeah. And at this point, I can barely metabolize alcohol anymore. So this is, who knows? I might be drunk at the end of this. I highly doubt it. But
she's such a cheap date.
Mm-hmm. Cheap and nasty.
I'm older than her, and I can still somewhat manage my drink, but not that well.
Only sparkling rosé.
Yeah.
But
hence the sparkly bubbly in the little
tiny little person mug.
Yeah.
Because I almost said the M word, and that's not appropriate anymore. No. So little person mug. But so Zoe is going to walk us through the decision of Roe versus Wade and help us understand some of the ins and outs of it and potentially what we could be facing coming out of the Supreme Court. Clarence Thomas has already said that he is looking at addressing gay marriage, the legality of gay marriage and contraception. So we're going to let Zoe take it away.
Okay, so the decision that came down is actually in the case of Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization. And that decision did overrule the decision in Roe v. Wade that's been law since 1973, and also a subsequent decision in Planned Parenthood versus Casey that was decided in 1992, I believe, which kind of confirmed the Roe v. Wade and kept that going as precedent. So that's what this decision is in the case of Dobbs. So the decision we're going to be talking about is Dobbs, but the effect of Dobbs was it overruled Roe versus Wade, and that's why Roe versus Wade keeps getting mentioned. And Roe versus Wade was important because it was the decision that confirmed that every woman has a constitutional right to an abortion, whereas Dobbs is saying, nope, not so much. So I'm going to go through, this was a 96-page decision. I think probably 70-something of it was actual decisions and opinions, and then the rest of it was other exhibits and references and footnotes and stuff. So it was a long fucking decision, and I went through it this morning, and I'm going to kind of give you the highlights, lowlights, so you can understand what it actually said.
And this is why I have Zoe doing this, because I would have gotten through page one and been like, what the fuck am I even reading? So, yeah.
So the background on Dobbs was Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization involved the sole facility that provided abortion in Mississippi brought an action against the state officials in Mississippi who were responsible for overseeing healthcare and medical licensing. And they were challenging the constitutionality of Mississippi's Gestational Age Act, which prohibited abortions after 15 weeks gestation, except in medical emergency or in case of severe fetal abnormality. So basically, the law in Mississippi was that You couldn't have an abortion after 15 weeks, except in a medical emergency or in case of severe fetal abnormality. And the provider of abortion services in Mississippi decided to challenge that. Now, at first bluff, the facility won. They were granted summary judgment, which means that they basically won before there was any trial. The defendants then appealed, and it worked its way up to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court struck down the previous court's decision that granted the abortion facilities win, and in so doing overruled Roe and Casey and said that the federal constitution does not provide a right to abortion, and the authority to regulate abortion must be returned to the people and their elected representatives. And we're going to dig into every facet of how that is just ridiculous now.
So I just want to make sure. So the medical establishment, they couldn't have abortion after 15 weeks unless it was abnormality or severe health issues. And the medical institution challenged it, and they won before they went to court. But then...
Before they went to trial.
Okay. Then it was escalated to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, no, in fact, you don't get to do abortions past 15 weeks, but then overrode Roe versus Wade on the federal level, correct? Did I follow that? Okay.
Yes.
So just to remind you guys, in the gun episode that we just did, episode 380 and 381 in 2 parts, part of the things that I talked about in there was the Supremacy Clause. And the Supremacy Clause says that the federal government has the ability to override the states in certain circumstances unless there isn't clear federal guidance in an issue, and then they revert it to the states. And so that's the reason why the gun laws are so fucked up, is because, besides this little package that they passed, which we'll see how that actually goes, the information, the federal guidelines for gun ownership was for gun rules and laws was very loose. And so that's the reason why there's so much confusion on it. And if the Fed steps in and they do decide to do something, then they will be enacting, of course, the Supremacy Clause. So just so you guys understand what Zoe's talking about when she's saying it's getting returned to the people, basically the Fed is saying it's not protected on a federal level. Now the states have to decide. So same thing with guns, but just for abortion. So I'm sorry, Zoe, I didn't mean to interrupt, but wanted to send people back to that episode too.
So as far as the justices of the Supreme Court are concerned, Justice Alito is who wrote the opinion. Justice Thomas and Kavanaugh concurred with that opinion, which means they agreed with that opinion. Chief Justice Roberts filed an opinion concurring with the judgment only, means that he agreed with the judgment, but he didn't necessarily agree with all their opinions. Justices Breyer, Sotomayor, and Kagan all dissented, but obviously they were in the minority of 3. But their dissents are pretty interesting reads. Now, before we go any further, we should point out these justices who made these concurring opinions, as in they agreed with this decision that there is no federal constitution right to abortion, lied effectively in their confirmation hearings. And I'll get to that.
Yeah,
now.
no, effectively. They fucking straight out blatantly
yes,
fucking lied.
Mm-hmm. Now, first of all, if you go to Judge Alito, he said in November 2006, Roe versus Wade is an important precedent of the Supreme Court. Then you get to Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Coney Barrett. In their confirmation hearings, under oath, each one of them fucking lied. First of all, in 2017, Judge Gorsuch testified when talking about Roe v. Wade, "That's the law of the land. I accept the law of the land." Liar. Then Judge Kavanaugh, in May 2018, in his confirmation hearings, when he was asked about Roe versus Wade, said, "It's settled as precedent of the Supreme Court." Liar. Then, in October 2020, Judge Coney Barrett, should be ashamed of herself, said, "Roe versus Wade clearly held that the Constitution protected a woman's right to terminate a pregnancy." Now, each 3 of those, that was their stated position in their confirmation hearings. And as we're about to delve into deeper, all 3 of them went the complete opposite way when it came to actually making a decision on Roe versus Wade. It's pretty disgusting. Now, the decision, like I said, was 96 pages long. 70-something of it is actual opinion and decision. And the kind of underlying theme of the decision, not the dissent. We'll get to the dissent, and the dissent means the judges that didn't agree. Okay, so we're talking about now, first of all, the actual decision that overruled Roe and Casey. One of the main cruxes of the decision is that the justices argue, some of the justices argue, the majority of the justices argue, that the Constitution makes no mention of a right to abortion. Now let's remember that the Constitution came into force in 1789. That's more than 200 years ago. No, it didn't make mention of an abortion,
right,
or the right to abortion, because women weren't even considered as equal people. They weren't even really considered as people under the law. And the Constitution was framed and written and
by
signed
white men.
By white men.
White men.
So
yes.
Of course they're not fucking interested in a women's rights to reproduction or women's anything, because women were just subservient to men 200 and something years ago. And let's not also forget that the right to bear arms in the Second Amendment that everyone fucking spouts about now, that's not what it meant back then, 200 and something years ago. They weren't referring to everyone's right to carry guns. There weren't even bullets at that time. What the right to bear arms was about was, quote, a well-relegated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. This is back when there was no army, no police. We're talking about the right of everyday citizens to rise up in a militia. That's not the same.
Yeah, but you can't change the Constitution. I mean, you have to interpret it. You have to interpret it exactly as it is.
Right, you interpret it very subjectively as you see fit.
Right.
So yeah, but you'll hear they mention it so many times that the Constitution doesn't say anything about abortion. Of course it doesn't. It was 200 and something years ago. Abortion wasn't a thing. So it's just ridiculous. Now, every state has its own constitution that is constantly updated. Mm-hmm. So you would think maybe the fucking main constitution should be updated to reflect the fucking times. Just like in Nevada, where we live, our constitution, well, first of all, thankfully, abortion is a protected right in Nevada. So this decision won't affect us right now. But the Nevada Constitution was updated relatively recently to make it clear that gay marriage was protected, because as time progresses and people change and the world changes, the Constitution has to change with it. You can't.
You would think, anyway.
You would think. I mean, let's not forget, in 1700s, 1800s, women were still getting murdered and dunked if they were a bit different, because people thought they might be witches. So, I mean, you can't, this complete ongoing will to hark back to, well, it's not in the Constitution. It's so ridiculous, I can barely stand it. Mm-hmm. So basically, the Supreme Court has said it's not a federal right. What we're going to do is leave it to every individual state. Now, leaving it to individual states is ridiculous. A woman's rights and a woman's freedom of choice should not depend on where they live. And I've heard some people say, well, if they don't like it where they live, they can move. That's so ridiculous.
Yeah.
Because this is going to disproportionately affect women of low income and people of color.
Mm-hmm. And we talked about
which we've talked about before
on the Roe versus Wade episode.
That these people that it is going to disproportionately affect don't have the funds or the means to just up and move to a different state because their state won't let them have an abortion. Plus, there is some states plan on enacting rules that prevent people from going state to state for abortions. Now, there's arguments about how that would be constitutionally correct in terms of people's freedom to move between states. But this is where we're getting at. You shouldn't have to decide where to live, right?
Yeah, it's like the gateway to a whole bunch of other stuff.
And it so is, and we'll get into that as we go along.
Yeah.
Now, the two decisions, like we said, are Roe versus Wade and Planned Parenthood versus Casey. Roe was first. In Roe, it was upheld that the right to an abortion was protected under the constitutional right to privacy. Okay. Casey argued the point on a different, it upheld Roe, but it argued that the right to an abortion was based on the right to liberty under the right to due process. So they both looked at it under different ways to meet the same end. And Casey was 20 years after Roe and upheld Roe. It followed Roe. Roe is a precedent. Casey is a precedent about precedents and was a precedent. And we'll get into that in a minute. So Alito goes on and on and on, and keeps, and lots of people have mentioned this in the media, he keeps harking back to how, first of all, obviously, starting with the Constitution, there's no mention of abortion, which of course there isn't. But he goes even further back. He was saying that before that, abortion was a crime in the majority of the states, and 30 out of the 50 states made it illegal to have an abortion at all. But so what? So what if that was the case in the 1700s, 1800s? Things are entirely different now than they were then. And let's not forget that women didn't even get the vote in America until 1920. So
fucking recent.
Yeah, and that's crazy. And he also, his language in his opinion is he refers to abortion's pre and post quickening.
What?
Yes.
What?
So,
quickening?
Quickening. Now, quickening means when a woman starts to feel the baby move, right? And there was a difference between whether abortions were allowed pre-quickening or post-quickening. And that's what there was a lot of talk about in the 1700s and 1800s. But again, he keeps stressing the right to an abortion is not in the Constitution, and it's not even in our nation's history, which is another factor to consider. He went on that Americans hold passionate and wildly divergent views on abortion, and state legislators have acted accordingly. And he stressed 26 states had expressly asked the court to overrule Roe and Casey. So what?
Right, exactly. What does that have to do?
24 states didn't. Well, what is now done is that Roe and Casey are overruled. There is no federal right, constitutional right, and we're going to allow each state to regulate abortion as its citizens wish. But that completely neglects to address the point that citizens, especially right now, don't have equal access to voting, and they're trying to restrict that more and more. So how can you say let's just let the states decide? You just decide by voting. Access to voting is itself in jeopardy.
Right. And we talked about this in the systemic, the economics of racism series, where we talked about all of the systemic issues that are from racism that are within our financial system. We talked about redlining. All of that's part of the same thing, you guys. Like it's all fucking there. It's just like a multi-layer shit cake. So the justice carried on that, okay, the Constitution makes no reference to abortion. I can't tell you how many times that phrase appears in this decision. It's disgusting. Okay, we get it. Constitution doesn't mention abortion. But you know what else it doesn't mention? Gay marriage, contraception, interracial marriages. Computers, the internet, your iPhone. It was 200 and something fucking years ago. Right. So they're very, very cherry picking very, very well here. So the justice goes on to say, even if the Constitution doesn't make any reference to it, the only other way that we could consider it is if under the due process clause is if the right is deeply rooted in this nation's history and tradition, which is why he keeps mentioning cases from you'll see even earlier than 1700, because he goes to English common law. But why he keeps mentioning decisions from the 1700s and 1800s, because what he's trying to say is it's not deeply rooted in our nation's history and tradition, because 200 years ago, abortions were a crime. It just makes no sense. Or it's implicit in the concept of ordered liberty, which again, he says it's not. And he says the right to abortion does not fall within those categories. And he says until the latter part of the 20th century, such a right was entirely unknown in American law. So were so many other rights that we take for granted now, right? Right. And he said, it's time to heed the Constitution, again, a document that was written and ratified more than 200 years ago.
And he says, the permissibility of abortion and the limitations upon it are to be resolved, like most important questions in our democracy, by citizens trying to persuade one another and then voting, which we've already said. That presumes everyone has equal access to voting, which they don't.
Correct.
And then he starts, as I said, he goes further back even than the 1700s, 1800s in America with the quickening, which, by the way, the quickening of when a woman first feels the baby move is usually between 16 and 18 weeks. But anyway, he goes right back to 1644. In fact, he goes earlier than that, but he talks about Sir Edward Coke's 17th century treatise. I kid you not. He quotes this as some kind of thing that we should take notice of. And this is an English case. This is from England in 1644, which says, the abortion of a quick child was murder, if the childie be born alive, and a great misprision, if the childie dieth in her body. We're supposed to adhere to this. It's mental.
I don't even really understand what it's saying.
Exactly, because it's an oldie worldy English, because it's from fucking 400 years ago.
And we talked about on the Roe versus Wade episode that I believe it was Louisiana was trying to make abortion a homicide. I think it was Louisiana. You have to go back and listen to that episode. And I think Oklahoma is following suit on that. I think Oklahoma has passed the no abortion period. So if the mother is going to die, well, fuck the mother, because, fuck her. Let's save this child so we can put him in the foster care system and then not take care of him and then throw him in jail and incarcerate him for the rest of his fucking life.
And that's what's going to happen. And that's what is happening.
Right.
Is that each state can decide if they want to limit abortion to 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 6 weeks, 15 weeks, or ban it completely and make it a crime, which is fucking ridiculous.
And the thing that's so scary is that with the Plan B pill, if this is the argument they're going to stand with on abortion, they could be like, well, the Constitution doesn't mention anything about Plan B. Well, it also doesn't mention anything about penicillin, fuck. I mean...
And like I said, the justice went back and even referenced English cases dating all the way back to the 13th century, which corroborate the earlier treaty statements that abortion was a crime. Well, fuck. In the 13th century, being a fucking woman was a crime, Being a woman that bled was a crime. Being a woman who had mental health issues was a crime. It just floors me that this would even be made relevant. And then they say, but let's not just look to England. Although let's look to England, but then let's not look to present day England, because present day England is nowhere near what you fuckers are trying to do. Present day England allows for abortion. Simple as that. We have restrictions on it. We have, there's guidelines that need to be met, but we allow abortion, dude. So if you're going to keep citing this English common law,
it's cherry picking, right?
Yeah, not so much.
Yeah.
So then they say, but forget about just England. Blackstone's statement in the USA in 1803 was that abortion of a quick child was at the very least a heinous misdemeanor. All right, so that's what you thought in 1803. Do we give a fuck?
And I wonder if any of those court cases mentioned any of the sperm donors who also did not want the child, or also whatever. I mean, the thing is that there's no mention of it. The thing that I have with abortion is that they always make it sound like the woman is skipping to the abortion clinic and, singing la la la, like it's just some easy thing that they're going to do. And there is never a mention of the fact that a lot of times the guys are like, oh, thank you, God.
Or they're forcing women to do it.
Or they're encouraging them, or they're, you know what I'm saying? They're completely left out of the equation. Like they, like it literally, like women just can't wait to get pregnant so they can go get a fucking abortion.
Because it's so much fucking fun, y'all.
Yeah, let's all fucking go party.
And that we use it as a form of contraception.
Right.
Have you any fucking idea how invasive and traumatizing an abortion is?
Right. It is not something you do. You're trying to tell me that it's easier to have an abortion than take a pill or use a rubber or pull out. Well, that's not really a good method, but you understand what I'm saying. Yeah. The point is that the argument that it's used for contraceptive is just a fucking bullshit. And what I will always go back to is like, if that was the case, the man could have put a fucking rubber on it. So I just, and it takes two people. It takes two people to conceive But...
And so the justice goes on, seriously, to equate the desire to have the right to make decisions about our own body to, well, if you go down that path and you follow to its logical conclusion, people could be wanting to license their fundamental right to use illicit drugs or be prostitutes. Say what now? How is that the same? He actually said that in his decision.
So is he equating it to legalization of sex work? Is that like what, I mean, what is he?
He's just saying if you allow people to say that one of their fundamental rights is abortion, what's next? That they have fundamental rights to use illicit drugs or to be prostitutes? I mean, that's a whole, it's a slippery slope. It's a whole different fucking issue. It's just bizarre.
And I don't mean to interrupt. Mm-hmm. So for those of you who are around Zoe and I's age, if you've lived in America your entire life like I have, the 80s got really conservative. Like, we went off the rails a little bit in the late 70s. We had high inflation like we do right now. And we were coming off disco, and, you know, crack came around in the 80s, and a whole bunch of stuff was going on. And Reagan was president, and the country turned extremely conservative. And I don't know how the Supreme Court was built during the Reagan years, because I was way too young. But I feel like the pendulum has swung to this ultra conservative. And I'm not an uber liberal. I like to think I'm left of center. Zoe is more liberal than me. But the thing is that I feel like we're going to do this conservative thing, and we're probably going to have another 8 to 10 years of this bullshit before the pendulum swings. But it's like, can we just stop the pendulum in the middle? Do we have to keep fucking swinging where there's like no control over anything and everybody's free balling versus you can't even fucking have control of your own body if you're a woman? I mean, like, just stop in the fucking middle. Like, I don't understand why a moderate candidate can't just emerge and just fucking be. I'm tired of both parties. So anyway, I just wanted to remind people, if you remember the Reagan era, that's what I feel like we're going back into.
I think it's worse even. But
Roe was legal in the 80s. So I mean, federal.
It has been for 50 something years.
Yeah, talk about taking a step
But now
backwards.
they're like, oh God, no. Oh shit.
Yeah.
We let you ladies do what now?
Yeah.
Decide whether you had a baby or not. Fuck that shit. You shall birth. And then the justice goes on to say, now look, this with withdrawing women's right to choose and women's right to an abortion, it's not going to affect women's freedom and work. Shall I tell you why? Because lots of states have adopted safe haven laws when you can drop off your baby anonymously. Or you can put your kid up for adoption, and you've got little reason to fear that the baby will not find a suitable home. What the fuck?
Okay, so let's wait. So you have to know about Zoe and I's day today. This comes full circle. So Zoe and I spent about an hour at the Animal Foundation today, and while we were sitting there, a lady came in and had to surrender 3 of her cats. Another older gentleman was there with the most adorable, vicious little kitty I've ever seen. She was so cute. There was at least 3 dogs in there that were in very good shape that had gotten out or gotten lost. And then there was a couple that was in there and it had lost their dog. And the thing is that, you know, the lady surrendering her cat, she's sitting there crying because she can't afford the cats anymore. And it was a mother and 2 kittens. And then you have people, I mean, you know, even when you surrender them, there's no guarantee that if they do get adopted, that the home that they're going to go to, like, we can't even do that for animals. You know what I mean? Like, we can't even make sure that animals are going to go to a home where they're going to be taken care of. There's no fucking follow-up. There's none of that kind of shit. So the fact that he can say with confidence that you can be totally rest assured that you can just, you know, have
Fuck
this
that
baby,
shit,
and surrender it, and somebody's going to take care of it. And if you remember from the Roe versus Wade episode, I think it was 92% of the time, women who are forced to carry the pregnancy to fruition do not give up the child. So if I could birth puppies or kittens, like, I wouldn't I couldn't give that up. I'd be like, oh my God. So if you're forced to carry a child that you can't afford, or a myriad of other reasons, the chances of you giving it up are extremely slim. And when we're talking about not affecting your lifestyle, if you do choose to have kids, we talked about on the Roe versus Wade episode how it discriminates against women, because women typically do more of the child carrying even in the modern times, which takes them out of the workforce, which takes them out of the opportunity to have overtime, which takes them out of the opportunity to work on the harder projects so that they might be the ones to get the next promotion. And what we start seeing is, at that point, we start seeing the gap in the income spread between men and women. And so it's not just this one-time thing.
And it's also, very importantly, if it doesn't matter if he says, well, if you can give birth and then you can just fucking chuck it somewhere within 30 days, and a lot of states won't criminally prosecute you, which is true, or you can just fucking birth it and put it up for adoption, completely fails to take into account the physical, psychological, and financial effects of carrying a baby to term. Mm-hmm. Especially if you don't fucking want it, or you're not ready for it, or
it's incest, or it's rape.
Oh, we will get to that soon too.
Yeah.
I mean,
and
it's a man writing this. That's a fucking shocker.
And the financial thing, again, I'm going to lead you back to the Roe versus Wade episode. Vaginal birth in this country, on average, is over $13,000, and C-section birth is over $22,000 average in the United States.
And that's another thing they say, well, there's healthcare and it's covered by insurance, or it's covered by Medicaid. Let me tell you, I had health insurance when I had both of my kids. It still cost me fucking thousands and thousands of dollars, which shocked me, because obviously in England, we have National Health Service, we have socialized medicine, so it doesn't cost you shit. Yet it doesn't cost you anything over there, and we still let women decide.
And let's go back to all of this is connected, you guys. This is what I want you to, while you're listening to this show, I want you to understand, when we're talking about finances, it's not just surface shit. So when we talked about raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour, one of the things that we covered was wait staff. And we talked about that the federal minimum wage for wait staff is like $2.12. Okay. And then each state can decide if they want to pay them more. So like in the state of Nevada, we pay, I think, our wait staff like $7-something. Okay. And then the rest of it is supposed to be made up in tips. And if we're talking about primarily lower income people, we would assume that they would have more entry level, lower jobs, who are not going to have health insurance. And if you're in a state like, I believe, Georgia, who does only pay their servers $2-something an hour, you're expecting them to be in a state where they're not going to allow abortions, making $2 if they're doing the wait staff, if I'm remembering our thing, with no health insurance. Like, this isn't, like, it just doesn't work like that. I mean, all of this stuff is connected, and it just doesn't work like that.
And he goes on that by removing it from a federal right and allowing the citizens, the people of each state to decide, that this allows women on both sides of the abortion issue to seek to affect the legislative process by influencing public opinion, lobbying legislators, voting and running for office. Women are not without electoral or political power. Well, they are if they're fucking barefoot and pregnant all their lives. How the fuck does he think that we're going to run for office and affect political change when we're fucking pregnant if we don't want to be?
And the Roe versus...
Plus, it's not true, but anyway.
The Roe versus Wade episode, we talked about at the end, Loretta Lynn's song called The Pill. Mm-hmm. And that was what she was saying in there, that she was tired of being basically a brood hen, is something to that effect. So, I mean, all of this stuff is just, it's just crazy how, it always amazes me how things link together that you wouldn't realize.
But how can he say, well you can all go and legislate, you can all lobby your legislators, you can run for office, but we're going to make you have babies whether you want them or not.
And we talked about the justice system, and we talked about how there is that the justice system is slanted more towards people that are white, more beneficial to people who are white. So if you have people who are black or brown, who are in lower income, they have more of a chance that they're going to end up having to be a single household mom with kids while they're working a lower wage job. So what you have is you have somebody sitting there saying that, well, if they want to change the system, they should get in the system, they should work from within. But if you are trying to raise kids as only one person with one income, how much fucking time do you think you have to go out and pound the streets and try to influence people around you? And again, that's not taking into account all of the ways that the financial system itself is biased, all the way from credit cards to loans to redlining, that is biased against people of color. I mean, it's a ludicrous comment.
Now, he kind of ends by saying, we have stated unequivocally that nothing in this opinion should be understood to cast doubt on precedents that do not concern abortion. Bullshit, because we're going to address that. So he's basically saying, don't worry, this is just about abortion, kids. Everything else is fine.
Nothing to see here. Move along.
No, move on. It's just you fucking women. You fucking women wanting to do things with your own bodies. That's our problem, but everything else is fine. And so he said, rights regarding contraception and same-sex relationships are inherently different from the right to abortion because the latter, as we have stressed, uniquely involves what Roe and Casey termed potential life. Well, that's not even fucking right, because contraception has something to do with potential life. Contraception, we're stopping ourselves from getting pregnant, right? So to its logical conclusion, we're stopping potential life, right?
Yeah, it's like what people are saying is that, you know, every time a guy masturbates and all of that sperm goes, well, that's just how many murders? That's all of that could have been potential children.
Exactly.
You know?
Fucking murderers.
I mean, and I would just like to point out that means that women can still masturbate, and we're totally in the clear.
That's about all we can fucking do now.
Yeah. So, no, I mean, but by that logic, so I think that should be the new law, is that they can only nut inside a woman, and that every time they masturbate, that's murder because of all the sperm. But women, we can just fucking nut all day long and be by ourselves. And I will tell you, I think that will limit a lot of abortions because nobody does me better than me. I'll tell you that right now.
True that.
Yes.
Okay, so then we move on to Justice Thomas. Justice Thomas.
Fuck that guy.
Fuck this
Fuck
bitch.
that. You know what? Here, let's take a little. I'm going to take another sippy poo of my little.
Cheers.
Or a chink chink. All
Cheers
right, let's take a
to
little.
fucking him. Not literally. Unless he's, you know.
No, not cheers to him. Fuck him and his wife. Fuck him and his wife.
That's a whole other story.
Yeah.
So Justice Thomas obviously concurred, as in agreed with that opinion. And he went even further, of course, and said that the due process clause, which Casey had used as giving the right to an abortion, actually does not secure any substantive rights. So it certainly does not secure a right to abortion. And for that reason, in future cases, we should reconsider all this court's substantive due process precedents, including Griswold, Lawrence, and Obergefell. And those decisions relate to same-sex marriage and the right to contraception. So he's already saying, hey, if the opportunity arises, we should reconsider those that are based on undue process, because no fundamental rights are given. So let's go back to that. And I've got to tell you this, my husband said, you know what? He's playing the long game, because he's thinking that not just same-sex marriage and the right to contraception, interracial marriage might be outlawed. And then he can get rid of that fucking bitch he's married to.
Yeah. Well,
I love that. It's probably true.
Yeah. So can you explain to me what due process is? Because I actually don't understand what that is.
Due process clause is a part of the 14th Amendment.
So I'm going to interrupt Zoe for just 1 second, because I know that she said due process a couple times. And since, you know, most of you guys, including myself, are not lawyers, I just did a quick Google search, and let me just read you what Google says so you guys kind of understand and we can all understand together. It says, what is due process? Due process is a requirement that legal matters be resolved according to established rules and principles, and that individuals be treated fairly. So is Clarence saying that the cases that were won based on due process should be re-looked at?
Yep.
Okay, so
same-sex marriage, right to contraception,
Okay, so I'm going to read what it says again. Due process is a requirement that legal matters be resolved according to established rules and principles, and that individuals be treated fairly. So Clarence Thomas is saying that he wants to review the cases based on the fact that they said that they have a requirement to be resolved according to established laws and principle, and that they should be treated fairly, correct? I just want to make sure that I'm...
Yeah, because he's saying that due process amendment doesn't actually confer any rights to anyone.
Well, because it wasn't in the Constitution then, so... but that's okay, because we can interpret it how we want to then, right? Because,
right.
Yeah.
Well, let's just go back to, 13th century, 14th century, whatever, 1300s in England, where we said that was just not cool.
And we left England.
Yeah, why the fuck are you... Well,
right.
You're harking back to it because...
Yeah, I know, it's our founding and stuff.
Common law, but like I said, don't fucking bring us into it, because we have the right to abortion, right? We don't have the death penalty. We don't have guns. So don't be trying to bring us into this fucking shit, okay? Seriously. Anyway, then we get on to the, oh so lovely, I like to drink beer. I like to drink beer with all my friends, Justice Kavanaugh, who also, of course, agreed with the opinion. And he said again, the text of the Constitution does not refer to or encompass abortion, and a right to abortion is not deeply rooted in American history and tradition. Which again, what does that even mean? I mean, it is now. It has been for the past 50 years, right? That I would argue that that's history and tradition.
And real quickly, remember that the Confederate flag was considered deeply rooted in the tradition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, I mean, as we've covered so much on this show, you guys, and it's just all kind of popping into my mind in different phases.
And then he goes on to say, now, because the Constitution is neutral on the issue of abortion, this court also must be scrupulously neutral. And when we get to the dissent, you will hear.
Yeah, how the fuck is that neutral?
This isn't neutral.
Right.
You're taking away millions of women's rights. That's not neutral.
Yeah.
Fuck you. And then he goes on to say, I emphasize what the court today states. Overruling Roe does not mean the overruling of those other precedents about gay marriage, gay sex, contraception, segregation, interracial marriages, and does not threaten or cast doubt on those precedents.
If gay marriage comes back up, I guarantee you Kavanaugh will vote against it.
They all will, because they're fucking liars. And they're just, anyway. But he's saying, oh, no, I emphasize that this doesn't affect other decisions where you've just had Thomas say, we're going to revisit those bitches because I don't like them either. And I don't like my wife. So let's see if we can get rid of her.
Thanks for listening. If you like us, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.